We're so thrilled to have you here for this great virtual field day where we take a closer look at the projects going on in the East and West Nishnabotna Watershed projects. So thank you to all of you who have attended previous virtual field days and provided feedback. We're grateful to have recorded some of this footage from last fall, and we'll be looking forward to some photos of what it looks like now to offer you that field feel while having a great discussion here virtually. So a little bit about the Iowa Learning Farms. For those of you that aren't as familiar with us, we were established in 2004, and our goal is to build a culture of conservation by working with farmers and researchers and landowners to implement practices that improve water quality and soil health while remaining profitable. This is made possible with partnerships with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, US EPA Section 319, Conservation Districts of Iowa, the Iowa Farm Bureau, Practical Farmers of Iowa, GrowMark, the Iowa Agriculture Water Alliance, Iowa Corn, and the Iowa Nutrient Research Center. So just a bit of housekeeping for those of you that haven't attended before. I do ask that you remain muted with your cameras off. For the first part of this presentation, we'll be showing a video and then having some discussion. But then following the discussion, you're welcome to unmute to ask your questions, or at any time you may submit them via the chat box, and I'll get those asked of our presenters today. Following today's presentation, which is being recorded, you will get an email asking you to evaluate this presentation. That also includes that recorded link. So if you know someone that wanted to attend but didn't make it today, feel free to share that link with them. Because this is just the start of the conversation, we're really excited to highlight these projects and take a closer look at them. But it's also important to then take these ideas and these projects where they can be best implemented. So please do share that link with other folks and then return that evaluation. And if you wish to receive a free Iowa Learning Farms Net Gator, all you need to do is return that evaluation with your mailing address, and we'll get that sent off to you. So today we've got two great speakers that are focused on the East and West Nishnabotna projects. They include Kara Morgan, project coordinator for the East and West Nishnabotna River Watersheds and works with Golden Hills RC&D, and Jake Miriovsky, who's the project manager for JEO Consulting Company that did the construction here. So without further ado, let's take a look at what's going on in the East and West Nishnabotna.
My name is Kara Morgan. I am with Golden Hills RC&D and the East and West Nishnabotna Watershed Management Coalition. The East and West Nishnabotna Watershed Management Coalition is a separate but sister management coalition that are both Huck 8 watersheds working together for a common goal. We have 11 counties that are involved. We have cities and soil and water conservation districts in all of those counties. They work together, and their two main focuses are water quality and to reduce flooding and flood resiliency. This particular project is a bank stabilization project. Being in western Iowa, we have deep loess soil, which is a highly erodible soil that tends to wash off and get into our river systems. So this bank stabilization is to help with the erosion of the soil along the river itself. This particular project is two landowners with multiple family members. One landowner is an absentee landowner that has her property leased out. So my job was basically to work with all of the different partners, including the engineering firm, and to be that liaison to bring this project together. These landowners have been wonderful to work with. They really do care about what their property is doing to the water, and this particular project will have a buffer strip, so improving the water quality is one main focus of this particular project. With that buffer, there will be habitat and forage. It'll be a natural prairie type buffer with the bank stabilization.
My name is Jake Miriovsky. I am the project manager with JEO Consulting Group. We've been working with Kara, the watershed coordinator, on these projects in the Nishnabotna watershed. This particular project is stabilizing approximately a half mile of riverbank that was severely eroded, contributing soil and nutrients to the river. So With this project, our design includes a combination of Bendway Weirs, peak toe protection, and bank shaping and a native grass buffer. So the Bendway Weirs and peak toe protection are meant to move the high velocity flows away from the bank. It actually promotes reestablishment of a floodplain bench that then can naturally vegetate. And it's a more natural form of bank stabilization. It's a technique that has proven to work well in eastern Nebraska, western Iowa. And as you can see behind me, the contractor is in the process of beginning to build the Bendway Weirs. And we're hoping to have this one wrapped up by approximately the end of the year. Yeah, one of the unique things with this site is that it is split between two landowners. So it's just great coordination between the watershed coordinator and the two landowners involved to get them both enrolled in the program and to be at the point we're at in construction. So a unique project in that aspect, one that we're really excited about getting completed.
I'm Roberta Overholzer. And this is my brother, Dale Evans.
Dale Evans.
And we own this property together.
We've owned it since 1998, so it's 22 years. I have farmed it since then, and my grandson has farmed it. He started like 6 years ago farming it, so he's a current tenant. Well, I watched this river erode for 20 years since we've owned it, and it was just a sickening feeling some years when this river would fill up, and we've had probably 3 floods in the last 20 years that have covered a good share of this 290 acres of crop ground, all but maybe 10 or 15 acres each time it flooded. And I watched the cuts come back in the rivers. Not only the river eroding the bank, it also ate back from runoff from the large 5-6 inch rains would create large cutbacks into the fields. So we had an opportunity to get government assistance with this, so we took advantage of it. We actually had started doing this on our own a couple of years ago. We had quite a little concrete stockpiled here on the bank, and we're going to do it privately.
And cheaply, privately and cheaply.
Yeah, but we were still about 25% short of the concrete. We had trouble acquiring enough concrete to finish the job, or to even start the jobs, and then this program came along and afforded us an opportunity to do the job at probably a much better job, but at less money.
We're just very thankful that this opportunity has come along, because it's just too much to handle for the landowner themselves. To be able to get assistance is wonderful, and we do thank you. Being able to have the engineers involved, the financial, the expertise, all of this wonderful help that know what they're doing, we're very pleased. We're very pleased.
Well, I hope this is a project that will last well past my lifetime. I'm sure it will. I've seen other projects that have done on this river that were just private projects, and one instance I saw was done probably 10, 15 years ago, and I'm seeing it starting to erode somewhat. But I'm looking for this one to be probably last longer than that. I mean, they need a little maintenance from time to time. I'm sure all of them do.
We are true believers of protecting the land. We want to be good stewards of the land, and this is one of the top priorities.
All right. So at this time, Kara, if you want to unmute and turn your camera on, and then you had some additional information you'd like to share about what's going on in your project watershed.
Okay, put this in slideshow mode. Sorry about that, everybody. Again, I'm Kara Morgan with Golden Hills RC&D. I am the watershed coordinator for the East and West Nishnabotna Watershed Management Coalition. And this project in particular is through the Iowa Watershed Approach. As you know, there were 8 presidential disaster declarations between 2011 and 2013. So the state of Iowa received $97 million for a HUD National Disaster Resiliency Grant. I coordinate 2 of the 8 watersheds that were chosen as part of this grant, both the East and West Nishnabotna River watersheds. As you can see down at the southern end here, they do merge just north of the community of Hamburg. Whoops. So you can see we're 2 separate but sister watersheds working jointly, and both watershed management coalitions meet quarterly. Our quarterly meeting was just yesterday. And part of that meeting, we have the East and the West. We have 21 members on the East and 24 members on the West, with 7 soil and water conservation districts, 8 counties and 8 cities on the East, and 8, 8, and 8 on the West. Our watershed management resiliency plan is well, darn, I think I have the wrong one here. Sorry. I'm going to stop share real quick because I have the wrong slideshow. Sorry, everybody. Let's share this one instead. Can you see that?
Not yet, no. There we go.
Which it is very similar. Okay, so we'll start right where I was. It was just the next slide that was incorrect. So our WMA boards collectively represent 1.1 million acres. And again, a map of the Watershed Approach projects with Hamburg just south here at the confluence. We have 13 landowners currently with nearly 100 projects. These particular 2 bank stabilization projects have a cost of about $1.8 million. And as I said, with that confluence, I wanted to show a picture of Hamburg because these are some of the things that we deal with here in Southwest Iowa. This was Hamburg in 2019. And downtown Hamburg after the flood of 2019. This was a perfect storm. Both the East and the West Nish received significant amounts of snow, and the Missouri River flooded. So with the Missouri River rise, it backed up both the East and the West Nish and caused a significant amount of flooding. In the Nishnabotna watershed and the western side of Iowa, we have what is called loess soil. Loess soil is a highly erosive soil, and we have deep loess soil. Although loess soil is found elsewhere, it's only found as deep loess soil here and in China. And here are our Loess Hills. They're obviously very beautiful, but they are also highly erosive. Here's some examples of some of the gullies that we have in Loess soil. And the depth. Loess soil is also called sugar clay. It's only stable when it's cut at a sheer cliff. And it washes away and dissolves like sugar when it's exposed to water and rain. Here's the power of water within our watershed. You can see where the banks have sloughed off, but there's also deposition of sand throughout this landowner's property. This is the second bank stabilization. This is not the one that was in the video, but you can see the historic change. You can see where I've highlighted in red the bank of that particular landowner, and then the bank just 10 years later. Obviously, this landowner is losing, a lot of acreage of his farm. This is the depth. And for those of you that have been through floods, you kind of know what to look for. Here's the debris of the water line of how high that river got in the 19 floods. And you can see just down here, the landowner that was in the video. This is looking south, and again, both cut and river deposition at the same time. And this is the construction beginning on that particular landowner. And looking to the north. You can see where they're starting to cut the bank to get that slope. Landowner partnership is key. The two particular landowners that we had in the video were a brother-sister landowner, but we also had an absentee landowner to the south who had leased out her property and really hadn't seen it in quite a few years. So getting her participation was key in this particular project because just where her property began was right where that bend of the river was really eroding back into the property. And again, I'll show you a historic video or a historic slide of this particular bank. So you can see where I've, in red, outlined the bank of the river itself on this particular piece. And you can see the property line right here where there's a driveway. This is just 10 years later. And you can see in red again, the original bank. And then you can see where the bank is today and the property line. So you can see why that second landowner was key, because if we had stabilized the bank through here and exposed the bank through here, we don't know for sure whether it would have increased the erosion on hers, but it definitely would not have helped to eliminate erosion on this area right here. This cut I like to show because it was not there before we started this project. And in the 2019 flood, that is the magnitude of what can happen along the Nishnabotna. This is where the landowner was working on doing it himself. Again, he had stockpiled as much as he could up here, hoping to stabilize the bank himself. And even a buffer strip that this landowner had. You can still see the cuts where it just eroded off. So of course, this is a picture of the project in October, when my youngest daughter had to be in quarantine because of COVID and she'd been exposed. So of course, we have to take the little ones out and teach them about conservation. And she has to wear her blaze orange NASA suit so that she's in safety orange. But you can see where the bank has started to be shaped here and where they're working, and they have everything stockpiled. So this is in October. And you can see as they put in the weirs, how it's already changing the current and pushing that main current out into the river further. The ice really shows where that current is and how it's keeping it from coming up next to the bank itself and eroding away. And so COVID strikes our house again. Of course, I take another daughter out to see what the progress is. And you can really see in January how much progress has been made in all of the Bendway Weirs. With low flow of the river and as dry as it had been, you can see those weirs really well. You can also see the current where it's pushed out away from the bank to eliminate that erosion. And then here's a back-to-back of the project itself with the weirs and the steep toe protection and the plans that JEO had put together for us. So this is again a picture of Hamburg sandbagging prior to 2019. And what questions does anybody have for me?
All right, well, great. Thank you, Kara. And again, feel free to get those questions in the chat. We've got a few that have come in. And then Jake is also here. So if we've got some technical questions, feel free to send those our way as well about the project, and he can chime in as well. So the question is, and this could be either Kara or Jake, I'll let you decide, but one side has been stabilized. What will happen to the other side now?
What it'll do is just hold that current in a specific position rather than letting it come in and eat away at the bank. So it'll stabilize that current itself. The other side will have additional flow, but back to the way it was originally, a little bit more.
And related to that, does the stream bank stabilization just push the problem of higher water volume and flow downstream?
Not really, because you've already got that high velocity and flow. And the highest velocity is on the outside of the curve. The highest flow is on the outside of that curve. So it's as it comes around that it's eating away rather than just pushing it.
So it's an effort to slow the flow there on the
Correct.
bend, and then that would help slow it as it goes further down.
Correct.
Okay. So someone's curious about the permitting. What permitting was required and who paid for it?
Jake, you want to go into some of that, or?
Yeah, I can kind of summarize. So with the federal funding of this project, it required basically full environmental and archaeological review. If people are familiar with the NEPA process, that is a process for which we obtain permits, and underneath that process, we had to get the Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit for the Clean Water Act and local floodplain permit for work in the floodplain. So those were the main permits. And of course, the NEPA process is a fairly lengthy and in-depth review process. So when I mention archaeological reviews, that required several levels of archaeological review and on-site digging to sample for archaeological resources in most cases. So the permitting was something that we handled through the project, and it was all funded as part of the grant for the project. So Kara, anything else to add there?
No, it's an extremely long and lengthy process, in my opinion. So it takes a little bit longer for some of these projects than others when it does require all of that NEPA.
So someone was curious, and maybe this one's for Jake, why not just cut off the oxbow and change the entire flow of the river rather than keep that bend?
Well, I guess that's a good question. The short answer is permitting. The Corps of Engineers will really scrutinize cutting new channels in a river, or even, you know, going back to a previous channel. So the second part to that is impacts to property that there would have needed to be a lot more permissions, easements, those types of things with that. And I guess the third thing I would say is not really addressing the problem. There would still be a residual risk that the river could jump back over to the other oxbow and continue eroding the problem area. So.
All right, so I'm going to toss this one to Kara first, but feel free to chime in, Jake, as well. Who decides how much area should be stabilized and how to do so? They've got a project that doesn't look anything like this one.
This one was actually limited by permitting. We would have liked to have had it a little bit longer, in fact, just because there was a little bit of curve there to the north that could have been stabilized as well. But there are limitations when it comes to impacts of the river itself. So.
And so while we're on the topic of permitting, someone was curious what other issues besides permitting was a struggle for this project?
I think that working with the multiple landowners was unique in this particular project, specifically because that absentee landowner, as I had said, had not really been involved with her property. It was really interesting, you know, when I took her out there for the first time to see this particular location. You know, she wanted to come down and see it, and she really was interested and intrigued, but she remembered it from when she was a kid because she had inherited it. So getting her to buy in to a property that at that point she had just been leasing out was a unique opportunity for us. That's why we really had keyed in on how much bank was being lost. You know, talking about how much area that she was losing as far as property really made an impact on her, I believe, and had her piqued her interest and got her to buy in. So that was an opportunity for us on this. Other than that, the permitting is really, you know, this one went really smooth, in my opinion. So, you know, it's once we had all the landowners on board and ready to go, this one has gone really smooth.
And a follow-up on that one, was this, when you say absentee landowner, were they local but not on the farm, or actually out of state?
She was out of state.
Okay.
Not far, but still out of state.
Someone's curious if your project or this particular stabilization requires any associated conservation practices like buffer or no-till to be implemented as part of the project. Absolutely.
We do have a buffer strip on this particular one, and we are going to use native prairie. So it's going to be a multifaceted project. So, you know, that'll make even more impact utilizing that native prairie. You know, at Golden Hills, we have a gentleman that's really well-versed, Lance, in our prairie aspect. And this one is also with the Iowa Watershed Approach, you know, in partnership with the Tallgrass Prairie. So there will be a strip.
And someone's curious on how wide that's designed to be, if you can remember off the top of your head.
Jake, is that one 60? I'm pretty sure that one is 60 feet.
Okay. So another question for Jake. Someone's curious, by narrowing the flow area of the water, wouldn't the water actually flow faster in the narrow channel and eat deeper into the center of the river channel? So some water flow question there for you.
Well, it will start to erode some of that sandbar that has developed over time. So the river will recreate its own basically equilibrium channel width over time by those Bendway weirs pushing the flow back out. The Bendway weirs, they're designed to overtop. The top elevation of them is only several feet higher than base flow conditions, and the reason for that is actually when they overtop, they still push the high velocities away from the bank because they're angled upstream. But they basically allow for the full channel capacity when the flows increase just slightly. And that's one of the key features, a way that we're able to permit these from a floodplain perspective. Our HECRAS modeling, which is required for floodplain permit submittal, shows basically no rise in the floodplain elevations with the proposed project in the model. So one of the reasons it's kind of a low impact type solution, also a permittable solution.
And someone's curious about the history of these particular types of weirs, if you know anything about the Bendway weirs that you could share.
Well, our history with them goes back to a partner that we've worked with for quite a few years. And that specific individual worked for the Corps of Engineers in their hydraulic modeling section for a major portion of his career. So he was very well versed and worked on a lot of models to basically fine tune this type of technique for these exact scenarios. And so I know Hungry Canyons have used these techniques in other projects in the area. We've used them in eastern Nebraska on some of the larger rivers there, the Platte River, the Elkhorn River. So quite a bit of history, and it really goes back to some Corps of Engineers modeling that kind of brought this technique to the scene of riverbank stabilization.
Excellent. It looks like Dave, you've unmuted. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
Yes. Will that work on a smaller stream? And is there aid available on a smaller stream?
Likely so. You know, it is definitely scalable, a scalable solution. The lengths of weirs are scalable to the scenario. The spacing is dependent on the degree of curvature of the stream that we're working with. So sizes of streams.
And in regards to the aid, it might depend on if you're a project like this one, the East and West, but definitely check with your local NRCS office for different funding opportunities for some of these stream stabilization projects. You might very well be in a project that has some additional funding to help with this on top of potentially what's available through the federal and state programs.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So speaking of costs, someone's curious on what the total cost of the project was and what the landowner's share was. I'll toss that one over to Kara if you're willing to give a ballpark on what the cost was and the landowner percentage of that.
I actually have, that's what I was just gonna pull here. The landowner portion was about 33,000. And Jake, do you have the actual cost on the bid on this one?
Yes, 765,000.
Okay. So a good sized project, but still some substantial investment from the landowners as well. So
Yes.
Speaking of, someone was curious, are the landowners adjacent to this doing any like no-till or cover crops to also help keep down the erosion?
I believe this particular landowner, yes, is also doing cover crop on his piece.
It looks like, John, maybe do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering what the flow was on those two branches in 2019.
So it was flooded and what, yeah.
I would probably have to get back to you on that. I know that we have a study going on right now through the Iowa Flood Center that they are studying the velocity and the impacts of the 19 flood. But I can definitely, if you send me your email, either in the chat, I can get that information and get back to you on that one.
Is there a gauge on the Nishnabotna at Hamburg?
There is. There's actually one at Randolph, north of there, just south of this project. And I believe there's one just north of this project as well. So yes, we have the stream gauges over here.
Okay, I can look it up then.
Okay.
So we had a couple people that are curious, and Jake, maybe you want to speak to this, what the lifespan of the structure is and how much, how you know the design will be effective.
We would expect this structure to definitely last at least 50 to 75 years. One of the key components with this project is that we use quartzite riprap, which is the best material that's available. It actually comes from quarries in South Dakota. Part of the reason the costs were higher, but it's very resistant to freeze thaw in comparison to limestone. And so it's a custom gradation of 3 different of types of stone that locks together really well. So as Dale stated in the video, the need for a little bit of maintenance over time, and definitely keeping an eye on any rill or gully type erosion that could occur, you know, coming off the fields. That's something that definitely needs to be watched and is typical O&M, but the project itself should last a very long time, at least 50 to 75 years. Likely a lot longer.
And as a follow-up to that, I'm going to toss this one back over to Kara, maybe related to the project, but who is responsible for maintaining those structures? Are there any agreements between the landowners, state, federal agencies, partners, things like that?
Absolutely, yes. Those projects have a 20-year landowner agreement. The landowners are responsible for the maintenance of those, and that is actually between the sponsor county and the landowner. So they do have both an O&M agreement and a project agreement that they sign.
And someone is curious, in how long did it take you from the initial meetings until construction began?
About 3 years that it took. We met with these particular landowners approximately 3 years ago. So it's not a quick process.
So someone's curious, and maybe this is some of the things that the Iowa Watershed Approach is doing with the Iowa Flood Center. If you have an estimated cost of inaction, had you not done this project, was there a cost of what that may have long-term been?
We don't. That would be something really interesting, especially as far as property loss. And you know, there's a lot of facets that could go into that. But no, we don't have any of that information.
And someone's curious if this project will help then protect Hamburg in the future. So it's not maybe just the cost of that site, but further downstream.
Right. This entire project and the Iowa Watershed Approach, JEO helped put together a watershed plan for the entire Huckate watershed on each side. And flood reduction and resiliency is one of the things that was put into the Iowa Watershed Approach plans. And that is the intent, is to help, you know, those communities that are affected by flooding and by any of these type of events. You know, obviously 2019 was an unprecedented event. I've been through a lot of floods in this area since the 90s, and we've never seen anything like that. But, you know, putting in multiple practices throughout Mills, Fremont County, and on north in the watershed, that is the intent of the Watershed Management Coalition. Water quality and water quantity, when we put together our plan, went hand in hand. And I know, that's something that we felt was a little unique to us. And it was a challenge, I know, to JEO and their team. But I think they had done that before, in a lot of the NRD plans over in Nebraska. So we had a wonderful partner putting together our watershed plan. And right now, we had what we called case studies within that watershed plan. And there were 5 case studies that we did. And it was a more in-depth look at actions that we could do beyond the Iowa Watershed Approach and moving beyond and continuing the program itself through our Watershed Management Coalition. 3 of those case studies are currently moving forward. One of them is looking at the confluence directly above Hamburg and how we can, different scenarios of how we can either open up the floodplain, raise the road, do different things to reduce the impact to the residents within that area. Another one is looking at urban practices, bioretention cells, rain gardens, things like that within the communities to help reduce the impact of runoff. And another one is our PL 566 structures. They're very prominent, throughout the state of Iowa, but really over here on the west side, and how those impact flood reduction and can hold back that water in a rain event. So this particular project, yes, that is the intent, is to help reduce the impacts of that flooding and to improve flood resiliency throughout the watershed, along with, again, water quality. But over here, we really look at both.
Jake, this one I'm going to direct to you. How many linear feet of the bank were stabilized within this project? I think you said about half mile, but
Approximately 1,700 feet is the actual from one end of the peak stope co-protection to the other.
Great. And then back to you, Kara. Someone's curious, was it hard to convince the absentee landowner that the project was necessary since they hadn't seen the erosion in person?
It took a little bit. We had a couple meetings with them. We were fortunate to have the adjoining landowner join us in the discussions because they were really bought in. And that, I think, really, nudged her right over the edge. We did meet with her. We sat down with Jake and JEO to show her what had happened. I took her out in my truck to see it in person. And then, she talked to the neighboring landowner, and it took a little bit, but it was well worth it. This project was definitely worth that time that it took.
And so someone had asked about cost share on OM, which would be the owner management, correct?
Operation and maintenance.
Operation maintenance. Thanks for that acronym.
Yep.
Spell out.
There is no cost share for operation and maintenance. This is, the landowner is required on maintenance on this.
Someone's curious, and maybe this one's directed to Jake as well, but do these projects require any post-construction inspections to ensure that they are performing as designed?
They don't require it, but as part of the 404 permit, it is recommended that there's 5 years of monitoring. But through our discussions with the local partners, the soil and water conservation districts, they've really kind of stepped up and volunteered that they want to be keeping kind of an eye on these sites and making sure they're working into the future. So.
And Kara, someone's curious, so you talked about a couple of projects at the confluence, you've got this project, but are there any other upper watershed projects in the plan? So further up north.
In the plan itself, I guess the urban water quality or the urban practice is intended not just for the southern end, it is for all of the communities that are impacted by internal drainage or stormwater issues. So it can be used, that particular case study was intended to be replicated throughout the watershed. The PL 566 structures is actually, we're studying them and partnering with the Iowa Silver Jackets to study up north of Atlantic, which is in the northern portion of our watershed. So yeah, we are looking at the entire watershed, not just a snippet, the 2 counties to the south. That's really the goal of the coalition.
And for those of us like myself that are unfamiliar, what is that PL? What does that structure look like? Or
Public Law 566. It is a pond structure or a holding structure. They can be dry dams, but typically they do hold water.
okay. So I'm going to toss this one back to Jake. Someone's curious, how many tons of riprap were used, and were any natural design features considered and or used in this design, such as live stake planting?
Good questions. Let me look at the tons of riprap. I have that somewhat available. Let's see. It was about 7,000 tons of riprap. And regarding the live pole planting, we've tried that on several projects with limited success. I would estimate from those projects, we probably only got somewhere between 10% to 25% of what was planted to grow. And so, and it's pretty labor intensive and costly. So with this one, we didn't go with that. Just based on what I mentioned with our past experience working with that.
So just for clarification, Kara, the maintenance is not only on these weirs and structures, but it's also in the buffer that's being seeded as well.
Yes.
So the landowners are responsible for that. So a couple
Right.
people have asked similar or questions along this line. And I know maybe it's a little touchy of an question, but would it be cheaper just to move Hamburg than to continue and try and change the river? So why aren't the residents of Hamburg who've been flooded multiple times move their homes?
Some are, but there are very passionate people within Hamburg, and not all of Hamburg is within that floodplain area. There is, obviously, the topographic of Hamburg is very flat right beside the river, but then it quickly goes up into the bluff itself. So, it's really hard for families to walk away from a home that they've been living in for years and years, and they choose, to stay where they were and where they grew up, or where their grandparents or great grandparents grew up. Some have moved away, moved out of that area, but Hamburg, there's a passion there.
So back to Jake, were you able to incorporate any of the stockpiled concrete there that the Evans had into this project? You mentioned the rock from South Dakota as well, but were you able to use it?
No, we were not. It was a mixture of broken concrete and concrete blocks. It was not the type of stuff that we wanted to mix or even bury with the better material. And part of the reason was it was such a mixture that would have required sorting, a contractor to sort it, to pick out the pieces that were able to be used, and that would have been expensive and probably made up the difference that would have been saved doing so. So we looked at it, evaluated it, had quite a few conversations about it, but in the end, went away from that.
And what happened to that concrete?
Well, the landowner is going to use it somewhere else, and I don't really know where, and I don't know that I want to know. So.
All right, I've got one more question before I share information regarding if you're here for a CCA credit, and that's, did the 2019 flood damage the progress that had been made to stabilize on any of your sites, Kara?
We had not started any construction in 2019. If anything, it really amplified the need that we had in the area for projects like this. So because of the timing, you know, we had not started any projects.
All right, so get your last questions in, but if you did attend today for CCA credits, I want to just share this information. I'm going to put it in the chat as well, so if you didn't get a snapshot of that quick enough, you can get my email from the chat to send me your name that you attended today with and your CCA number by 5 p.m. today, and I'll get that submitted to give you that credit. And we hope that you can join us in a couple weeks, which is Thursday, April 15th, which is no longer tax day. It got pushed back this year again, but we're going to be taking a closer look at our Conservation Learning Labs project, where we're exploring the impact of cover crops on water quality. So hope you can join us on April 15th as we look at that project. And let me stop sharing here. And we've got one more question that came in. This is an interesting one too. Do you have any collaboration with Missouri? This person is in particular is south of Hamburg and Watson. So curious if there's been any interstate collaboration on this project so far.
Not on this particular project itself. I know we work really closely with the other states. We work with, I know there's a setback being done right there south of, on the 136 area, very similar to the one that was done on the Missouri River of Highway 2. So working with the Corps, we work with a lot of the same people at the Corps and other areas, but in these particular projects, we have not, we just within Iowa and within the Nishnabotna Watershed.
But yeah, very much a reality of how interconnected our water is. It crosses county lines, cities, states. So we all got to be in it together. So with that, that was the last question that has come in. So thank you all for attending today. If you have any additional questions, feel free to get those submitted. You can email me. That's again, that email's in the chat, and I can direct those to Kara, and we'll get you connected to get those questions answered. So thank you so much for attending today.